we know you from Law and Order, the Chicago PD series, and you were one of the few that were on the Law and Order Chicago PD crossover shows. So I have a couple of questions about that. One, what was that experience like? Let's start with that, and then we'll get into the follow-up question.
It was fascinating, to play a character, I had played for years, couple of years, to play Nick Amaro, written by Warren Light and by our writing staff, our writers, and then to receive a script with Nick Amaro in it, written by the writing staff from Chicago PD. Um, you know that that's really it's a really interesting thing to as an actor to read a script and to either see your character or to be like, huh, I don't know that I would ever, ever say that or do that. And then you immediately have to check your ego and be like, wait a minute. Maybe he would do that. Maybe he would, right? So, I mean, it's uh characters are like people. We're inconsistent. We contradict ourselves, you know. And so it was the exploration of that, in addition to feeling like you were on a field trip, going from New York and going to Chicago, a city that I absolutely love. My wife was born in Evanston, and so we've been to Chicago a bunch. Uh, it feels like New York with especially in the city. Um, and there's a certain grittiness, and it was freezing cold, and that gives the episode a grittiness too, because there's no way to fake, not being cold. It just is what it is. And when police
Smoke
officers,
coming off your mouth is really the smoke coming off your mouth.
that's a dead giveaway, is my nose. My nose turns like bright red, and the makeup comes in. They try to cover it. I'm like, it's not gonna help. Just trust me. I'm like Rodolfo the Cuban reindeer. It's gonna just be,
In the middle of Chicago.
yeah. It's gonna be what it is. And in a way, I prefer that. There's when police officers are investigating, you investigate. You don't get to choose where that happens, right? And so dealing with the case and with the climate, and with a city that, for my character, uh, is not, within his comfort zone. That was really fun. Something to play, something new. And also, when you're cold and you're out in the elements, it's one of the only things that is real, right? Like, you don't have to pretend that it's cold, right? And that lets you into sort of a piece of reality, and then you build on that in the scene where it's just that's your foundation of reality. Um, and then, of course, as a tough detective, you play against it. I'm not cold. I'm good. You're cold. I'm not cold. Although my face is like bright red. But no, I had a fantastic experience, and the cast at Chicago PD was incredibly welcoming, and so were the writers. Um, and then to have them come over uh, and play with our cast in Manhattan. We did an episode over there, on our home turf, and so we tried to extend the same sort of welcoming to them. It felt like cousins we'd never met.
It's funny that you were talking about the like transplanting of like I'm a detective in New York to Chicago, because you really do have to alter yourself. You're like, now I'm in Chicago. They do things differently here. And now you're working under Voight, who's a completely different animal in its own context. So it's almost like kind of playing a new character, right? Or
I think it's like playing the same character, but in a different playground. You
okay.
know, like, when you go to your neighborhood playground and all the places that you want to hit, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do all of these things. I love the swings. I love the slide. These are the things I love. and you go to a new playground, you're still you, but you're like, oh, let me explore this. Oh, this is a little, faster than what I'm used to, or this is just uncommon for me. And so it's a little bit like that. It's maybe for athletes, it's like playing an away game. You're still part of the same team. You're still using the same elements. The game is still the same, but it's not where you are. Uh, it's not your comfort zone, which is a fantastic thing and is very um, applicable to what police officers go through when they're conducting investigations away from home. There's all different levels of bureaucracy. Everybody has their own sort of way that they work, right? And you're dealing with that. My brother's a police officer in Miami, and so um, I've had multiple conversations with him when he's had to travel for an investigation, and there's a camaraderie, but then there's also like this is how we do things.
Well, and people that are fans of Law and Order franchises or the One Chicago franchises know how real and authentic to the real life police work or firefighting work, whatever the show's about. Dick Wolf does a good job of making sure to convey that in whatever the show is.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, the rip from the headlines that I think Law and Order, the mothership, really you know uh, brought into television and into sort of the creative zeitgeist of we're watching the show because we've read this headline, right? And so what's true, what's embellished, what's dramatized, um, and ultimately it's meant to sometimes educate, sometimes give a point of view about the justice system or our legal system, um, but it's always meant to entertain.
Yeah, definitely meant to entertain. So, speaking of the entertainment element of it, prospects of another Law and Order One Chicago crossover. Yes or no if you're a betting man, and give us your ideal storyline.
Man, I haven't been there in so long. If I'm a betting man, I would probably say that I think the fans would want it. I think that is. I think we got a lot of very positive feedback whenever we had uh, the Chicago PD over in Manhattan Special Victims, or vice versa. Um, Whether it would happen or not, I have no idea. I really don't. I don't mean to like back out on that answer. I have like no clue.
So let's do this. If it was to happen, if I was to sit here and say it's happening now, we know it's a go. What would you say the storyline, or what would you want the storyline to be if you could create it?
I mean, I always think that conflict really makes the best drama, the best entertainment. Uh, so, probably a storyline where uh, both teams have very high stakes in an investigation, and both teams want to claim that they were the ones that cracked it and that they were the ones who have the jurisdiction over it. Um, but I think at the end of the day, both shows and I think both sets of leadership on the show realize that it's justice that needs to be served, and it's the victim that needs to be served, and it's their voice that is often suppressed. And so I think at the end of that episode, that'll be what happens, and everybody will put their egos aside and realize that the reason that everybody got into this in the first place is for service.
Interesting. So it's kind of almost like a turf war too, because
I
they're
think I think oftentimes when uh, you're dealing with people who uh, are incredibly good at what they do, and when they're under such high stress and high stakes situations, uh, there's a certain amount of wanting to claim it, to claim, being the ones who solved it or resolved it. Um, but I think, the more experienced, the people who understand that uh, it's really not about them or not about their precinct or their department. Uh, those are the cooler heads, and those are the ones that I think are more likely to get the result for uh, the victims and the victims' families. So I think both shows do a fantastic job of putting characters in the gray area, right? So nobody's ever always right, right? Um, I think there are characters who are more right more often, but everybody exists in sort of that gray area. Uh, and both shows do a fantastic job, I think, of challenging the actors, the guest stars, uh, the regulars on the shows to push themselves. I know I always felt that Amaro was on the precipice of losing his badge. Uh, and there were multiple times in a season where I was like, I don't know how he's going to get out of this, right? So uh, it's an art. It's an art what the writers do, where they paint each character into a corner just to figure out a way to bust through the wall. You know,
Wall very well every time.
yeah. And I think that that's what would happen in a crossover, that there would be a lot of gray area, but ultimately, because you know, the reason these characters became police officers to begin with was to serve, that they would find a way to resolve it in a way that benefits the victim.
I like it. You want to write it? You want to direct it? Can we bring you on board for this?
Let's get it.